Yeah. So Keith, now that you've seen behind the curtain in more detail, is it like, are the needs more varied and kind of complex than you thought beforehand, or what's your view now, Keith? How did your expectation change? So as far as expectations behind the curtain, trying to BS the answer on stream. Could be a bit more structured, sure, but I think the idea of a perfectly organized team is a myth. Patience, communication, persistence is more important qualities. Working across disciplines is tough. I feel fairly lost when talking about 3D modeling, for example, but when we pull something off, it feels so good. Yeah, the structure thing's interesting, right? Because we can talk about that more as a team, but here's the thing. The reality is, when we, and this is not unique to our team, but I've seen this everywhere. When we push certain elements of structure into the playing field for people to use, you guys, not all of you, well, let me say that differently. Not the whole team, but like you, for example, people don't necessarily latch on to the structure, if that makes sense. Like, so if we're saying, hey, we need you to do X to help with structure and communication, I actively monitor and have monitored since the beginning of the project, though I have been more of a proponent of going more loosey-goosey instead of being too sort of like, let's get overly formal, like kind of overly structured project management overhead in place. Because what I like to do is kind of see if we put out a working sort of structure, a little bit of, hey, these are the expectations. We need you to check this box or say this when this happens or do this thing. I look to see how much that's actually taken up by whom. And my read so far has been that when we do push for the structure, it's not really taken up very well. But even without the lack of structure, communication tends to be fairly good. It's fairly predictable to see who's going to sort of run off the reservation in what direction. And so then the work becomes more about a direct sort of like, hey, notice that you ran off here. Could you get back over here and work with so-and-so on this, right? And so it's more of like a active project management instead of trying to be formally structured. Because the structure isn't adopted, right? And what I found is it's easy to quickly fall into this sort of pattern of, we put the structure in place and we're probably going to go one of a couple directions or a few directions. One will be, we analyze the structure and see how we could refine the structure in order for the structure to work better. But it's not necessarily a structure problem. It's a personal accountability and personal communication problem within the team, right? So individuals aren't just doing this simple thing that was asked of them that could help the team. And so you can either spend a lot of time spinning your wheels on trying to get this silver bullet structure and refine the structure, or you could look at the individuals and be like, all right, we've got a pattern of behavior now with individual 1, 5, and 8. And so then we really look and go, what's going on there? Now, in an environment where you're getting paid and this is your day job and blah, 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 same thing happens, but the accountability part of it goes kind of differently on this side, because it's more like, hey, you're getting paid to be here. You're getting paid to check the box. You're getting paid to, let so-and-so know when this shit's done, or to do the thing that such and such told you to do. And if you don't start getting that right, then you're not getting paid anymore because you're going to be on a different team. For us, we've been really good in that we've got good personalities, mesh well, good chemistry, and there's a good amount of sort of personal accountability and stuff like that. And so far it hasn't been a problem, but I do think there are definitely some areas where, as this year progresses, we're going to be pushing a little bit more and being like, hey, this needs to be a little bit more predictable, or the communication needs to improve on this front or that front, etc. And then what I would say is, if we find, especially with this type of team, And you know, those of you that are working in startups or whatever, you can give me your opinion or say if you think I'm full of shit or whatever. But what we may find is at this stage, folks that are looking for a lot of structure are on the team at the wrong stage. And so that goes into sort of the, it goes into the kind of, what is it? The explorer, settler, there's a third one that's not the city planner, explorer, settler, city planner, right? Because the explorer is just like, you know, you're hacking through the bushes and you're swimming across the rivers and building canoes and shit and fighting off bears with sticks and all eating beef jerky and getting dysentery and dying, like explorer. But you kind of do that, and you know, you don't necessarily need a map. You're making a map, right? You're the map makers, and it's all about communication and adaptability and persistence. Then the settler is like, oh, thank you for cutting a path to here and clearing the trees. And now we're here. We're going to get a little bit more structured, and we're going to kind of like hunker down a little bit. And we are the beginnings of the structure, the real structure that later the city planners are going to come in and be like, I see your structure. And what I'm going to do is add a few layers of bureaucracy to it. And I'm going to improve it, right? We're going to refine this and make it work better, right? And so what I've found is a challenge on teams is, especially when it's a startup or a prototype project, you know, like you're trying to get greenlit or whatever, is you can get a misalignment on that. And we've had a few people, you know, come in to take a look at things on the team over the last 2 years. And they come in and they're kind of like, you know, they're very much people that need structure. And it's like, this isn't going to work for you, you know, and it's not like the people who are not good or smart or rad people. It's just what we can't do is like, Shaka, do you feel like you fell into that? My memory was more of like it was also previous experience versus sort of like Unity UI shit that we were asking you to do wasn't necessarily the best match. But if you felt that as well, then yeah. And like I said, it's by no means a criticism. They're just different people. Let's see. Nicodemus said, Quest tool would be a nice to have, not as important as the game engine programming, which I know Ali and Nick have been focusing on. You guys are doing great with the resources. We surprisingly well with the resources we have. It's appreciate you saying it. I definitely believe that as well. Bellpaster says, as long as you think far enough ahead, you don't let it turn into equivalent underground NPCs yelling at each other, then you're good. Underground invisible NPCs yelling at each other to make stuff happen is not bad if it allows you to identify the actual need and then you come in and replace that. But having a tool set that actually allows the designer to hack shit and make that kind of cool thing and then go back and like go, all right, this is what we need to maybe make that better is kind of been the target so far. Ali actually loves the invisible NPC thing, so he's already facilitated it in our tools. Shaka said, yeah, true. It was more just not being able to keep up, and my job at the time was killing me. Yeah, I remember you got the new job right after that, so... Excuse me. Pioneer Settlers Tau Planners by Simon Wardley. Yeah, if you check Slack, I think I might have linked that in the past. But it is very much, it's a thing that people need to be aware of because, you know, different folks, because here's the other thing. If you get a bunch of settlers on a team that's basically, it needs just town planners, they're going to lose their brains as well, just because it's like, yeah. So a CGX just said, yeah, I'm pioneer as hell. Exactly. So coming into like 8-year-old live project or 10-year-old or 11-year-old live project isn't necessarily the best place for pioneer. If the project has a nook or a cranny where pioneers can go out and start to like take the project in a new place or kick up something new or whatever, it's cool. But otherwise, they you bring them on a team, they lose their minds. John had not heard about that either. Yay! It's always nice when I can show you guys or expose you to something new. It's interesting because it is something that you can also see in a company where you see that with problems that startup founders run into, right? Because I can imagine M&M's going good, we're rolling along or whatever. There really should be a succession plan in place that already accounts for like, folks like Ollie and me and probably Nick. I don't want to speak for other people, but like I could see us, at some point when everything's riding good. Like my goal is always to try to find the right people to come in and basically just replace what I'm doing. And then ideally, if we do that, the first goal is always to make sure the flagship product is super secure. It's very much like, that concept of building your castle, having just the most defensible position possible. And so, our flagship title, the thing that is providing us with success, should always be the priority for the company. Until you hit some point later on strategically where it's clearly not the thing that the business is hinged on. And even then, because of the community that's been built up, the goodwill, the good karma, it shouldn't just be neglected, or it shouldn't be allowed to fall into disrepair. It should be put up on a shelf. It should be put in a fucking museum, right? Where it's like, we still cherish this product, right? So like EverQuest 1, even while I was on the team, it kind of felt like it was already, that's not, we got the new hotness, which is EQ2 and Star Wars Galaxies and PlanetSide. Oh, that's literally, I've heard this, standing in my polo shirt at E3, probably, I don't think it was tucked in. But I had a polo shirt on with like Variant on it or something. And having like the vice president of marketing and sales walk by with the Best Buy people and like the other big shots, and he's like, yeah, that's EverQuest, that, like, not even stop at the booth. It's like, yeah, that's EverQuest, that one, it sells itself, like, oh, let's go look at the new stuff, right? It's like, a company should never do that to it's the goose that laid the original golden eggs. It's bad karma. It's just bad karma beyond just being bad form. Right? I'm like, oh, okay. Oh. Because at the time, the game didn't sell itself. You know what I mean? Like, we actually had to do a shitload of work to make the game. And all of a sudden, seeing our marketing budget go down to nothing, where, like, basically our marketing budget got to the point where it was me taking screenshots of different stuff that we were working on to take to the guy, Mark, on the web team, who would do a quick paint over of it, and I'd write up a bunch of lore, and then we would release that every week or so leading up to the expansion, right? It was like, at the time we were like, Forbes articles, #1 MMO in America at least, and blah blah blah, and I'm writing fanfic, and someone's doing quick paint overs of screenshots, and that's our marketing. So, yeah, it's just not good karma. So, yeah, this tangent was kicked off by the whole Pioneer thing. Anyway, when it is time for the founders to move into new stuff, or the core team that's built up Pioneers to move into new stuff, first priority is to make sure that the existing thing is super secure, and, is something that's going to have its legacy carry on, even if the new things that are started are looking like they're going to overshadow the previous thing. Is Best Buy still around? I don't know. I don't know. I haven't been living in America for like 8 years. Jasmine was asking me where we could buy like a CD for her mom while we're in the US. And I was like, maybe a Best Buy flea market? If it's new, I don't know. I don't think there's like music stores anymore in the malls. Best Buy still around? Okay, good. BDC Retro way earlier ago, prior to my ramble, said, J Bombo.
Best Buy is still around and so is me.
You are. Thank you for being here. Even if you don't sell CDs. Thank you for 4 months, buddy. BDC Retro said, what bugged me at my last job was, as an employee, was when there was a directive to do X, but when only some people did that and the management said nothing to those who didn't, it makes it feel like they didn't... Oh. Makes it feel like what they want doesn't actually provide a benefit since they let people slide. Yeah, it's a challenge, man. Like as a manager, you run into that as well, right? Because there may be a reason. So a lot of times it's just there's no real good excuse for it. But on the flip side, there's often there's also the situation where like it looks like the person's not doing what was requested, and it may actually be the case. And management may be going to those people kind of on the side and going, "Hey, you gotta step it up, or you gotta do." You got to hold yourself as accountable as these other people because you're letting the rest of the team down because the other people in the team are doing this shit. You're not doing it. And it's not good. It's discouraging to them. The fact that you're not being held accountable publicly isn't necessarily a good look, as the kids say these days, blah, blah, blah. But on the flip side, they may be people that provide value or certain value where you're also wanting to retain them. So you can't just come and be like, yo, WTF, shape up or ship out, right? And so then it's like, how do you work with those people to try to make them better, right? Try to be more accountable, try to be in alignment with the rest of the team, while also not just giving them the, hey, this is strike one, you get 2 more, and then you pack your shit. You know what I mean? So BDC Retro says, I'm in a leadership position now, and I'm very careful that any directives I give are equally followed. Keep it simple and keep in mind some things are not worth dying on a hill for when deciding what directives everyone should follow. Yeah. And there's certain things that are like clear directives, this needs to happen, versus like, hey, we're trying this, let's see what happens. And it's done with an understanding that it may or may not click. And I think that latter example, for right or wrong, I don't know. I'm not saying I'm a good leader or whatever. But for right or wrong, that's kind of where we've fallen on some of the stuff is like, hey, let's try this and see if it works. And when it doesn't, it's like, okay, it's not the right thing. Let's talk about how to improve that. Nicodemus says, a lot of jobs now seem to be short, 3 strikes and you're out, almost baked into the system so labor costs remain low. Those 2 sentences together confuse me. Belfaster says, I think a great manager can help people understand why they're having to do something, and also being pretty open and honest about acknowledging that the thing they asked them to do might suck, not work. Coming from somewhere, the occasional sales initiative, the type that makes you feel dirty, comes down. If you try and shove that down people's throats, they're not going to like it, but managing out of some version of fear is never great in my experience. Fear of punishment, losing your job, etc. Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's compounding a problem. There's some reason why people aren't doing what they're doing, right? People need to know why they're being asked to, why what they are being asked to do helps the company. I agree to a extent, but I've found personality types that are like the 8-year-old. where you can explain why, and then the response is, okay, but why? And then you can explain some more, and then it's like, yes, but why? And then you can explain some more, and then it's, okay, but why is it that way? And at some point, it's kind of like, especially when it's one or two people out of like a a bigger group that's kind of still in why mode. I've found especially as I've moved to Europe, and then especially as I've worked with younger people, there's more whys, and it's like I really at some point, as the CJ said, at some point the answer to why is it's capitalism, buddy. You know what I mean? Like at some point, it's we asked you to do it, and the bulk of the team's doing it, and you're the only one that's not getting it. Belfaster says, I think a great manager can help people understand why they're having to do something. Also being pretty open and honest about acknowledging that the thing being asked of them might... Oh, I've already read that shit. Why did I... Oh, I was looking at... A wise man once told me it's always easier to change the system than change the people. It's always easier to change the system than to change the people, but that assumes the system needs changing. My reality is sometimes you've got the wrong people in the wrong system. And the idea that's just never the case either means you're looking for like a really, really, really awesome manager or company or whatever, or yeah, that's an interesting one in terms of expectations. Believe it or not, sometimes it's the people. Shaka said, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Big Matt responds, one of the managers here will explain. So Nicodemus says, it feels like some companies are okay with not having employee retention. It's okay not to have employee loyalty. That's expected. Some labor jobs are short because it saves money for the company, not by providing merit increases or promotion. You have someone in a job until they mess up 3 times and then get a new employee. Let me just stop and focus. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it. I've had a executive tell me when I was earlier in my career, basically, you're all disposable, especially as designers, because we can go to any forum and find more. Right? So, yeah, I think, there's definitely different takes and cultures, etc. Especially in bigger companies, because, I mean, it's one thing if one of our 14 people disappear tomorrow. It's a different thing if one of 1,400 people disappear tomorrow. If you have to change the system to suit the people, the system wasn't defined well enough to attracted the wrong people. Things can be nudged, but changing it to suit each person. But even that feels a bit utopian, John. You know what I mean? Like it's like, if you get the wrong people on your team, then the environment wasn't defined well enough. But like, if you look at what we're doing, we're a volunteer-based startup that's going on 2.5 years in, where we are flying by the seat of our pants, etc., etc. The expectation is that the system's not going to be perfect or right, and so the possibility of us attracting wrong people exists. What we can't do is, we're not going to spend a lot of time trying to create the perfect system in order to attract the right people. We're going to try to create as good an environment as possible, vet people as good as we possibly can, get them in, and if we've missed something or overlooked something, then we're going to have to communicate with the people and be like, hey, here's where maybe things aren't meshing. See if that changes over time, and if not, then we picked up the wrong person. I think it's relatively straightforward. When it boils down to it, getting the right people takes time, takes willingness to learn on the subordinate's part and patience on the manager's part. Both are crucial to process, but ultimately a good manager will breed good employees. Ultimately, a good manager will do as good as they can to provide the opportunity for the employee to be as good as they are. But the manager's not breeding employees, and the manager's not going to, be the perfect sort of like therapist or whatever to make them a perfect employee. Like, to me, that just the intent of what you're saying is good, and it's kind, and it's positive. But this idea, and I hear it a lot, especially I'd say in the last, more and more over the last 10 years, more and more, it's this idea that it's the system, we didn't have a clear enough mission statement. The company values weren't the right values. The manager, right? And it's everything except for the employee, unlike other people that they can look around and touch and see they exist around them, isn't taking accountability, isn't communicating like the rest of the team, right? It's not Timmy's fault. Timmy just needs you to warp reality around him like mommy and daddy did when they walked him into the job interview, and just make it so that you come on, guys. Make Timmy work properly. And by make Timmy work properly, it's, include him in all decisions up and down the chain, and build the perfect sort of safe room around them. Hopefully that wasn't too snarky. Sir Dan Valen, thank you for the follow. Leadership is the art of getting someone else to do something you want done because he wants to do it. Eisenhower. Zeitgeist, thank you for 10 months. So Nicodemus is saying a lot of companies have layoffs every few years. If it's around 5% of the workforce, it's considered housekeeping. Yeah, it's like that wasn't it Jack Welch that basically said stack ranking your employees every year. Reward the top 10%. Lay off the bottom 10%. There's a lot of there's a lot of that going on in the second half of last year, and now you're seeing more of it going on at companies already this year, and you're going to see more of it as the year progresses. It's just, it is the circle of life, Simba. And then once I got in the industry, I would say it was less about my managers and more about learning just about the reality of like being in creating products, like working in a creative environment. I would say that my favorite manager that I've had to date is one that when we have the interviews, like with the EQ folks, people are a little hesitant, or they'll mention some crazy shit that he did or whatever. But it's because of sort of the way he presented himself rather than what he was doing as an actual manager or sort of empathetic, caring person or leader of men. I would say that there was a lot of stuff that rubbed there's a lot of examples there that I've held closest since then. So when I worked on EQ, we got a manager named Robert Pfister, a producer, came in from Casual Games. He wasn't an EQ fanboy. He looked at it as like, all I care about with this product is not like putting my name on it. I don't have a vision for the game. I don't really care about the subject matter. His thing was, he said, basically, I know this is the thing paying all the bills in the company. I understand that it's popular. I don't get why, because it's not my type of thing. But he understood that there were people on the team that did. And so, he picked his leadership team, or, looked at the leaders that were there and continued to sort of flesh that out with additional leaders by just seeing who was most passionate, most invested, had certain characteristics. And then from there, he really put it back on us and was like, if there was this meeting with Smed or Russ or anybody, he would call out, hey, design guy, art guy, programming guy, come with me. We're going over there, right? And then he would just basically put us forward to have the actual interaction. So what he was doing was, he wasn't trying to be a filter. He wasn't trying to press his agenda necessarily. He was just his agenda was for us to be as structured as possible in his understanding of structure, and just be as effective as possible. So, and his thing was, and so this is interesting because I've talked to people since then that worked with him later, and they were like, oh yeah, well, but essentially they saw the opposite. But what I saw when I was there was somebody that was often willing to like take the hit for the team. He had already been fired a couple times from Sony and then brought back, right? But the thing that he always said, whether he always lived up to it, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't there forever. My dad was always this way as well, but it was like, you need to be willing to get fired for doing the right thing, right? It's not about saving your job. If you've got to do wrong shit in order to save your job, the job's not worth it, right? And so that's been a thing where I will say that, and at the last three, to be perfectly honest, at the last three companies I was at, I was a part of leadership at some level, and my either superiors or peers and superior, if you were to ask them, they would probably politely say that they respected certain aspects of my approach and did not agree with me in a number of areas. And sometimes that would come off as, oh, and you could have done more. But there were times where it was basically like, no, we're not going to do that, right? Like, I'm not going to back that. I'm not going to, if I will gladly either step out of the role, or leave the company, or you can fire me. And there are a number of those conversations that happened. And in one case, it was like, later on in talking to the individuals, we just don't agree philosophically on approach, or there's definitely enough butting of heads there that when the individual had to start up later on, it was like, I was talking about, maybe that might be interesting, and spoke with another person that was part of that team, and they were like, yeah, no, he doesn't like your approach on that. The cool thing is, I mean, not the cool thing, but I would say that they went on to spend 6 years making a product that is now already gone. It's an MMO that just didn't make it. And if I had to guess, based on everything that happened with it, it was because they continued to do shit the way that they were doing it that I didn't agree with. And so, but who knows, right? Like, that may be a very lame thing to assume, or there may be hubris in thinking that we're going to do any better, but I'm definitely driven by the idea of like pushing things forward in a certain way to, finally unfettered from conflict with upper management or boards or, folks, peers that aren't aligned with that way of thinking, unfettered from those things to test out whether or not the approach that we are taking can actually work. And so far, it's been good. Shannon B, thank you for the follow. Buffhester said, also, he wasn't trying to get credit for the team's work. A lot of managers are absolutely horrible at that part of the job. Being the face when something is bad and let your team members get credit when... being the face when something is bad and letting your team members get credit when something good... get credit for something good they help with. Yeah. And it's not a hard thing to do. Nicodemus says, the stream is a good example of what it's like being a manager, trying to get stuff done at your computer as all your direct reports come in your office and ask you about their projects constantly. The struggle is real. It's all good. There is a little bit of that as well, right? And it's one of those things where there'll be times you can sit down and get like a DM. It's like, hey, you got a minute? And naturally, if I'm like, man, I want to, do my stuff, or like, I want to get this thing done, or I'm in the zone. There's always that initial moment of like, but that minute, which ultimately is always, 15 minutes or an hour or whatever, is so important, and it's so good that's the priority. The selfish enjoyment is just like putting on the like headphones and getting work done. But like the real work, the work of value is anytime there's an opportunity to communicate with individuals in the team or put something out that's either actionable or helps the team sort of align better or work better, right? So yeah, that is absolutely, that's the important stuff. The fun stuff is just implementing shit every once in a while and doing creative stuff. Taking PTO so you can ignore meetings and messages just to do your actual work done that. Kimry, it's so funny you say that. Absolutely. I've had to do that at companies a bunch. Like, I'm going to take 2 days off. And it's basically just doing all the other stuff that got built up.